be back with you tonight. All week long, we've been making a dinner of boeuf bourguignon, or beef burgundy. And tonight, we'll make potatoes to go with it. Now, don't worry, I've got the recipes for all the week right here. You can pick these up from me after the program. So, now, usually boiled potatoes are traditional with this dish, but I'm going to make a variation. Grated potato cakes. I'm going to move my little cat here a minute. I always have a wooden cat on my set because I think that a house without a cat is like life without sunshine. First, you steam 3 to 4 large potatoes, grate them with some salt and pepper, and put them into your frying pan. You let them cook for a while, and after they've browned at the bottom, you flip them. Now, it's kind of difficult with a loose mess like this, but when you flip, you just have to have the courage of your convictions. So, I'm going to flip. Oh, that didn't go very well. Well, don't worry, you're alone in the kitchen. Who's going to see? Just pick them up and put them back in the pan. You see, the only way to learn how to cook is to learn from your mistakes. You've got to say, as the French say, c'est la vie. Omelets can go all over the stove, the sky can fall. I'm going to learn. Bon courage. Be of good courage. There was a time in our life when Paul and I needed courage. Now, when I joined the OSS, secretly I dreamed of danger, but mostly I just did paperwork. Still, I always kept my emergency signaling mirror handy in case I was captured and would have to be rescued. I'll tell you a secret. I still keep that. Oh, I'm breaking my stove. Well, things can get broken and keep going here. I still keep that little mirror handy because it reminds me that the OSS woke me out of my stupor when I truly began to live. You see, before I joined the OSS, I was drifting in life. I had no goals, no aspirations. I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what that something was. And when the war broke out, I eagerly wanted to help my country. I decided to join the Navy, but I was rejected because I was too tall. So I got a job rather, at the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, or the oh-so-secret, as I called it. Now, secretly, I hoped that I would be a spy. I suppose it's difficult for a 6'2" red-headed woman to be inconspicuous and say, China. So I settled for doing paperwork. I also was on a team that created these little signaling mirrors for downed pilots in the ocean. And we worked on a shark repellent that is used today. But when an overseas posting in Ceylon became available, I jumped at the chance and went overseas. I did have my most harrowing experience on the way there. We flew from India to Ceylon over the Himalayas, or the hump, as it's called. Now, this was a very treacherous journey. Many planes crashed, and there were no survivors from those crashes. Everyone on the plane was grim-faced and white-knuckled, except for me. I just read a book. I didn't care. Once I got there, I was put in charge of the registry. That meant every secret agent in China, Burma, and India sent me their reports, which I organized and made accessible and sent on to Washington. So you could say I had my hand on the pulse of the entire secret goings-ons in the CBI, China, Burma, India area. My office looked right across the compound into Paul Child's office. Oh, he was an artist, recruited to help General Mountbank have a war room, and then later General Wiedemeyer. He was older than I, about 10 years older than I, and so sophisticated. I was just a California social butterfly. He didn't pay much attention to me. But later we were both transferred to Kunming, China, and we became more than friends there, and were married after the war. I credit the OSS with finding me the love of my life. Now, the OSS was nothing like the CIA, which it later became. In fact, the military didn't even like it very much. For you see, they considered it to be a fly-by-night organization. It was run by a man named Wild Bill Donovan. He was a Wall Street lawyer. I met him a few times. You would just fascinated by him. But he was an idealist. He hired creative, artistic people to be in the OSS, and quite a few wealthy socialites. Because he thought that if you were rich, you couldn't be bribed. Well, at any rate, most of our friends were very much unlike the military types. They were creative artists and writers and linguists and cartographers. We would have interesting, fascinating discussions. Of course, we have all gone on to other work these days, but we all remember those OSS days as among our best. But we kept in touch with our friends, of course. And when we would get together, we would talk of nothing but politics. For the politics were very frightening in the 1950s. Living in Paris, the labor strikes were crippling. And America was at war in Korea. France was mired in a sickly and disheartening war in Vietnam. In fact, it was America that was sending arms to France to fight in Vietnam, which led to a great deal of anti-American sentiment in the streets. My husband felt sure that at some point, America would certainly get involved in that war as well. It was inevitable. And even while we were there, his boss was transferred to Saigon and forced to work with the Bio Dai regime doing PR for them. The Bio Dai regime was not freely elected by the people, and yet America chose to back that tyrant. My husband would complain and say, why would America continue to back puppet dictators like Tito in Yugoslavia and Chiang Kai-shek in China? What could we say to a communist who could correctly accuse us of backing puppet dictators? Fear was being sown back home, too, for during this time, McCarthyism began to spread across America, and we watched trials by McCarthy take away so many of our friends from their jobs. McCarthy, in the name of communism, mostly persecuted people with his witch hunt who disagreed with his own personal politics. Friends that we knew were fired. Many lost their jobs. Others, mostly senior members, quit in disgust. And they were people who were needed in a country at war, where they had experience in those countries. I couldn't believe my countrymen did not cut McCarthy down to size, and I lost respect for President Eisenhower for allowing this tyranny to continue. From what I had read in U.S. newspapers, McCarthy was supported by Texas oil millionaires, and all of Washington was afraid of him. How could anyone who knew what America was supposed to stand for allow this desperate powermonger to continue? Finally, we got to see McCarthy's work firsthand, for he sent investigators to investigate the staff of the U.S. Embassy in France and all over America. They were young men, typical bullies, and reminded a French friend of ours of Hitler's Gestapo agents. They gave a press conference throwing all sorts of dirty, vague, unsubstantiated rumors at all of the staff at the U.S. Embassy, and then demanded that the top officers and the U.S. ambassador meet with them on Easter Sunday. Like everyone else, we canceled our plans, and we went to the embassy. We waited all day. They never showed up. Finally, they were found. They had been out carousing all night and were found eating breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning at their very expensive hotel paid for by taxpayer dollars. Well, they graciously interviewed the ambassador and the officers, but mostly they discussed where they wanted to see next in Europe and which office they would terrorize next. It was enraging and infuriating. My husband noted the only research they did was to study the naked showgirls at Montmartre on Holy Saturday night. What could I do to stand up to McCarthy? I would do anything. Stick my neck out, bare my breasts, small size though they may be. I would not turn my back on anyone. I will sacrifice cat, cookbook, husband, myself. I'm serious. Finally, our worst fears came true. Paul was summoned back to Washington, we thought, for a promotion. But he sent a telegram saying only situation confused. The bizarre truth dawned. He wasn't being promoted, he was being investigated. God, would he be arrested? He was interrogated all day and into the night. They asked him, what kind of books did he read? Who were his friends? Did he know any communists? Was he a homosexual? He just laughed at the last one. They asked him to drop his pants to prove that he wasn't a homosexual. And he refused on principle. Finally, they gave up on him. And finally, he asked for and received a written exoneration. But I can tell you, it left the taste of ashes in our mouth. The only thing I hate more than Joseph McCarthy is TV dinners and Jell-O salads. You can see it's very easy to make fresh food, and it's very easy to fix your mistakes when they go wrong. Well, I've talked to you quite a bit about my politics tonight, and there is someone else who talked to you about politics, so I think I shall end my section and say, bon appetit.